Well, we have discussed the reaction to the elections, but in addition to statements, there are also some actions, or let's say potential actions. Well, for example, about military events, about who is going to send whom where, who is going to place where and what. What has changed after the elections in Russia?
But France's talk that it is going to send troops to Ukraine is getting louder and clearer. The line where they will be placed, the Dnieper line, is already called. It is already being said about the number of 20,000 people. This, by the way, is a classic army corps of the First World War. That is, it is a fairly significant military formation. Naturally, these conversations lead to a number of interesting questions. For example, isn't this a provocation of war? And here, I was very interested in the statement of the French colonel, who said, by no means. This is not a provocation of war in any way. This is a red line that we are demonstrating to Putin in order to conduct reasonable negotiations with him.
On equal terms?
Yes.
Or was there something that was said?
Something like that. Something was said on reasonable grounds. And this moment is very curious and interesting. To a large extent, it demonstrates the way of thinking that Europe is currently using, with all its positive and negative properties. Well, what's positive here? France considers itself an ally of Ukraine and is ready to provide allied assistance to Ukraine. In principle, a normal human action deserves respect. With a negative, everything is much more fun. And I'm not talking about actions now, but about the level of thinking. But here's the question. The French military form a red line that... And that's when the thought stops. Attention, the question is, how can Russia react to this? Well, the colonel's supposed reaction is quite obvious. Knowing that the French military is there, Russia will not be offensive on this territory, not to exert any pressure on it with the help of shells, artillery, and so on.
Why?
The picture looks pretty fantastic, so we're looking at a realistic version. Realistic version 1. Russia discovers this grouping, and they begin to gouge it with all the means at its disposal, without really thinking about other sections of the front, like, let's figure it out here first. Thus, Russian soldiers, with the help of artillery, or by other means, it does not matter to us now what, are killing the French military. According to the French colonel, this is an attack on a NATO country, the response to which will be a war with NATO as a whole. Well, the first moment. If everything goes as the colonel sees fit, he gets as a result a global European war, probably with the use of nuclear weapons. He probably considers this result to be positive, since it is on him that he generally focuses in his answers. We are not going to consider the positivity of this option now. We will look at the other side of the problem. Generally speaking, there is no attack on a NATO country in this case. Well, let's lay this option. Let's say a French mercenary went to Nicaragua for some reason, and someone shot him there. Attention, question, what will NATO declare war on Nicaragua after that? The answer is that we don't even come to pay attention to this event. In this case, there are more people, but this does not fundamentally change the situation. The French military are where they shouldn't be. They find themselves in a war zone. They die in the war zone. Attention, the question is, what is the article about the NATO Treaty on Self-Defense here? And with a probability of 99 and a couple of nines. NATO will react to this as the absence of an incident, that is, the conditions for the use of the alliance. He won't fight. Thus, we have a situation for France. Losses. 6. It doesn't matter if the losses are big or small, but suppose it's really bad, and the losses are big. Of these 20,000, let's say, 3,000 were killed, 3,000 times. What cannot be silenced? What is being talked about all over the world? NATO says in advance, this is not our case. And in general, the rules are a question. This is not his case. And what should France do?
What is France trying to achieve? What is it trying to achieve? If it believes that NATO should somehow respond to the provocation it is organizing, and in the way it does.
I will try to answer this question a little later. While you're watching, we're looking at a simpler thing. So, NATO does not react in any way. What remains for France to do? Option 1 is lost. This, well, in general, it is clear that there are no elections yet, but this is the case where it is possible not to live up to the elections. In general, losing your soldiers through complete human stupidity is not forgiven by politics. And in this case, it's really hard. But option 2, what else to do? Declare war on Russia alone. Well, and if after that, the same NATO countries that are located between France and Russia declare that they are neutral in this war, and French troops simply will not pass through their territory. In this case, what should I do at all? And we are observing a very interesting situation. We looked at 4 scenarios. One scenario leads to an atomic war. The second scenario will lead to an internal political crisis in France. The third scenario leads to the fact that France is trying to fight with Russia for all of NATO. Nothing good comes of it. Not even in the sense that they are not able to wage such a war over France, but that the war does not work because of the lack of a common border. As a result, we come to the conclusion, and here we come back to your question, that the only thing the French are sure of is that just by learning the very fact of their presence at the front, the Russians will immediately stop their offensive in horror. On this occasion, I recall my beloved Dr. Tarish, who once described a very unsuccessful tournament for him, wrote, "I was sure. I was under the impression that the opponents should lose due to the irresistible fact that they are opposed by Dr. Tarish himself. And therefore, my just cause will surely prevail. Therefore, without delving into the position deeply, I was only thinking about avoiding draws. And you know, I succeeded." That's about the reaction. In fact, the French really, this is a very important moment for understanding both the previous and the future that we will have. The French are Europeans. They still have the classic European swagger, however, which has rightly developed over a century of their colonial successes. From their point of view, there cannot be decent troops comparable to European ones in Nigeria, Gabon, or Ukraine. Therefore, as soon as the Russian barbarians find out that they will not fight not with Ukrainian barbarians, but with European French troops, they will immediately stop the war and accept all conditions.
But
They really think so, Natalia Mikhailovna. That's what's interesting here.
it's just that, despite the fact that we constantly discuss the short Russian memory with you, it seems to me that everyone will remember the War of 1812 with pleasure.
That's it.
In Russia,
They will remember the war of the 12th year. They will remember the war of the 40th year. But that's not even the problem here. I didn't think there was anything to remember here. The French troops as a whole have no experience in modern warfare right now, and therefore, at least the first 2 or 3 months of the war will be absolutely vulnerable to those methods and techniques that they simply do not know yet. Yes, they have read about them, they have seen them, but it is quite one thing to see, another to check for yourself. They haven't developed the necessary reflexes yet. And these reflexes, of course, they will have time to develop, but, quite likely, not the thousands who will be sent to Ukraine. And this is a very interesting situation. For me, of course, it is interesting here that only one of the many options is being considered, that the risk of this one option is off the scale, and in the rest of the solutions. A major domestic political defeat, or, And here are the terrible words, or, at best for the designers, a nuclear war. Here's how to design an operation so that nuclear war is for you at best.
But it seems to me,
That's the question.
it's been a very long time since we all got used to proceeding from the fact that some intentions, declarations of intent, turn out to be frightening, scary, in general, in principle, a sufficient moment to influence the opposite side. In the modern world, this is no longer the case.
2 years is no longer the case, but another one is also true. Look, to be honest, very often we proceeded from the fact that a threat does not necessarily mean its implementation. But in these 2 years, we have been convinced with interest that everything that the West threatens to do, it does. And therefore, when he now threatens that French troops will be sent, I would take it seriously. And from the point of view of Russia, who will probably meet with them on the Ukrainian front, and from the point of view of France, which should now understand that it does not depend on how events will continue to break out, it will lose these troops specifically.
Well, yes.
I repeat it again, in the good old, because in the bad they get surrounded and captured. And Russia is beginning to politely change them, it's not entirely clear to whom.
Let's see. Let's hope that there will be smart actions on the part of Europe. Perhaps France will not send anyone anywhere.
Yes, I would be happy to believe that too, but to be honest, now I would say 2/3 to 1/3, that there will be French troops in Ukraine. However, provided that they have time, the French are still very unhurried.
Thank you.